Lesson 22, what our eyes see and what our cameras record. In this lesson, you'll learn more about the basic differences between what we see with our eyes and how we perceive light, and how our cameras record light. We can see a broader tone range with our eyes than any camera can currently capture in one single frame. This will change over time as technology continues to develop, but for now you can see more than what your camera can actually record in a single frame in most circumstances. This is really important to understand because it will help you to make more creative choices about how you set your exposures and also how you compose your photographs. Our cameras have limitations, and it's good to understand this because it will help you set your exposures and get your photos looking the way you want them to. You may have noticed that as you're doing these exercises and taking the photos for them, that sometimes the main subject of your picture is a little bit too dark or a little bit too bright. This can often happen when there's high contrast or a bright light included in your composition. This happens because the tone range that you're recording in the scene exceeds the tone range that your camera can capture in a single frame. Stick with me and I'll explain this a little more. In these situations, you need to control your exposure settings so the part of your composition that you're most interested in getting exposed right, which is usually your main subject, is actually well exposed. And sometimes this means that you can't just leave it up to your camera to decide the exposure settings. I'm going to need to get a little bit geeky as I explain exposure and exposure meters here. Inside your camera there's an exposure meter that governs the exposure settings when you're using any of the auto modes, or it displays how the photo will look when you take a photo if you're looking at live view, or it gives you some indication of when you're going to be underexposing or overexposing your photo based on the graphic readout that you can see either through your viewfinder or in your monitor. And this exposure meter inside your camera is calibrated to read the light as though it's reflecting off a surface that is middle grey or 18% grey. That's halfway between black and white. And this middle grey tone is the foundation for every exposure reading that any camera makes. Camera engineers calculate the controls based on this middle grey calibration. But as you know, not everything you photograph is going to be a middle grey tone. Sometimes it'll be significantly lighter, sometimes it'll be significantly darker. This is why we must adjust our exposure settings depending on the light and the tone of your subject. So you must manage the controls of the exposure triangle, your aperture, your shutter speed and your ISO, so that you can get your subject exposed the way that you want it to look. And this is particularly important when you're photographing in high contrast situations. If you're photographing something black and the light's really strong, you've got to be careful to adjust your exposure so your subject doesn't look washed out and grey. Or if you're photographing something white, that it doesn't look grey and flat, or the other direction, overblown and containing no detail. You need to make choices about how you manage your exposure, and this is a large part of the creative art of photography, of painting with light. When you understand more about the limitations of your camera and how it records light, you're free then to make better choices about your exposure and also how you compose your images because of the light and the tone range in your compositions. Lesson 22, practical exercise, what we see and what our cameras record. The aim of this lesson is to get you thinking more about what we see and how we perceive a scene and how our cameras record this scene. Find a light-coloured subject to photograph, particularly one that's got some texture to it, and place it in the sun, somewhere that it's casting a shadow, that you'll also be able to include the shadow in your composition. Compose a series of photographs of your subject. Take some where it's comprised of a lot of sun and very little shadow, and then try and compose some where there's more shadow and less sun. Take some photos using aperture priority or shutter priority and vary your exposures with the exposure compensation. For some, dial it up. For others, dial it down. So you're overexposing and underexposing some portions of the photo. Because it's a high contrast scene, your camera probably won't be able to capture detail in all the highlights and all the shadows at the same time. I'm going to photograph these cacti here, and I'm going to photograph them so that they're backlit, and I'll photograph them from the other side so that they're front lit, and that's going to give me a good variety. And when you've done this for a while, switch your camera to manual mode and take some more photos of your subject. And some of them adjust your settings so that your light meter is reading 0, and on others vary your exposures again. It might be helpful to use your electronic viewfinder if you have one, or live view to see how you can vary your exposures. For some of them, try and expose so the highlights look good, and for others, expose so the shadow areas look good and contain details. Look at your camera's monitor and look at the highlight areas and the shadow areas in the photos that you're taking. And now look at your subject again and study it and check the difference. Can you see a difference in the amount of detail that you can see with your eyes and how much your camera's recorded? How about in the shadows and the highlights? Can you see as much detail in those areas? And don't forget to be taking good notes about what you're observing and the settings that you're using. Checking your camera's monitor as you're taking photos and reviewing them will give you a pretty good idea of how your photo is going to look, but you've got to remember that what you're seeing on the monitor is actually only a JPEG. If you're taking RAW files, you won't see this until you load it to your computer. So often, particularly in high contrast situations, your camera will be actually recording more detail than you're able to see on the monitor. And don't forget to save a few of your best photos to your favorites folder. The main points in this lesson are: our eyes see a broader range of light and tone than cameras currently can. Your camera's exposure meter is calibrated to perceive everything as middle grey. Not everything you photograph is middle grey. Practice this to improve your photography. Look at your subjects before you photograph them and imagine how you want the brightest and the darkest parts of your compositions to look.